So normally I don't like calling out certain companies, but there's just too many things happening here in the cultural and just in the social media space. I have to address it. It came to my mind this weekend. A lot has happened and also through March. But basically, if you haven't heard, Bud Light released an LGBTQ themed cans, a bunch of material, marketing material, social media material, and a lot of their cans are just rainbow colored. If you haven't seen it on the news or somewhere, it's just, there's so many, things being said there. LGBTQ, they have it stand for Let's Grab Beers Tonight, Queens. They have the pronoun stuff all over the cans, she, her, he, him, they, them. And then they have this very popular LGBTQ social media influencer, Dylan Mulvaney. And then I think in the March Madness, the commercials and stuff like that, just heavily advertised everywhere. But this man who claims to be a woman or wants to be a woman and all that is just going around and just promoting it. And then you have so much backlash, right? So this is not just coming from, the grassroots effort, but there's so many stores, apparently wholesalers, so many people are just rejecting the shipments in mass. And some of the reps, and this is not going to be on your news, your mainstream news. The reps, the wholesalers, and these guys have been saying the problem is exasperated. It's so bad what's happening. All the small mom and pop shops, convenience stores, a lot of these guys, and of course some are accepting it, but there's many of them that are saying nope to these shipments. So there's just, they're sitting in warehouses somewhere. It's pretty bad. And then you have a lot of people just posting. If you just go on TikTok or social media, Instagram, so many people are posting everything from them just draining the beer just down the sink and then throwing away just their entire loads of beer, all the way to, I think, Kid Rock, who is, a musician, was shooting basically the cans and just cursing it out, right, outright. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of backlash. People like, especially in the mainstream news, they're calling it a, right-wing, extremist kind of thing. But again, if you know the news and if you've been following it, they're going to paint certain things like this by using the extremities, the people that have been either the worst or not a good representation of the movement, of the biblical godly movement, and saying that these guys are causing the ruckus and look how bad it is. But really, the majority of people are saying, I'm not supporting, whether it's a beer company or just any sort of movement in this space for which you are pushing and stuffing down my throat certain movements. I'm going to say it this way, right? So think about it this way. It's a double standards issue. If you had Jesus on these cans, if you had crosses, if you had scripture, if you had biblical messages in place of the pronouns and the colored cans and all that stuff, if you had that, what would be the backlash there, right? People would say, okay, that's obviously not acceptable in some sense. For Christians, it would be nice. But for a beer company who is supposedly supposed to be neutral and selling, beer and alcohol, and by the way, I don't have anything against drinking a beer or two or wine, right? Jesus drank wine. I'm not here to promote alcoholism and getting drunk and getting drunkenness with wine. You can talk about, things like Romans 14. There's a big discussion you can have in terms of the degree to which you want to live in total abstinence and all of that stuff. And that's fine, right? And so that's a different discussion. But what I'm saying is that for this company, right, what is their place to be promoting this over something else, right? If you were to promote religion, if you were to promote any other movement, what would that say, right? So this is a double standards issue. Now, the other thing I want to say is that this is good for the power of the people. The power of your voice is being heard and it's effective, right? Now, again, there's no, at the time of this video, there's no repercussion in terms of the marketing team and them dropping, this Dylan guy. So I don't know what's happening there, but the fact is that these guys are losing profits. They're losing money because people are rejecting them. And you have the choice. You have the choice not to buy from them. You have the choice not to stock them, to advertise for them, and talk about them. And so you can cancel them from your boycotting. So that's good. That power, that amalgamation of the people getting together in mass, that's a good thing. So continue doing this without, obviously, violence or advocating for illegal, unethical means. But the power of your voice is very strong. Now, the other thing I want to talk about just quickly is that this is a microcosm of other things in corporate culture, in your church, in your family. And this movement, the movement of gaining territory is a big issue right now. You have been stewarded. Every single one of us, we've been stewarded. A calling to each our own, whether you are in the boardroom, maybe you're an executive, a senior executive of Bud Light, and you claim to be a believer, or you are a senior executive or some corporate person, and you have the choice, you have the chance, the opportunity to make your voice heard, right? So again, I'm not saying I know it's a black and white issue, but if I would imagine if you're sitting down in a boardroom and you had the chance to dissent to this idea, to have LGBTQ themed, rainbow color themed, drag queen type themed cans going all over the US and saying, you know what, as a beer company, we stand for this. And you allowed that to happen in your boardroom. You said nothing and you sat still and you allowed that to pass and it gained territory into your domain. Then part of me says, shame on you, right? What one verse that comes to mind or one story that comes to mind that's applicable is a story of Esther, Queen Esther, Mordecai, right? He said something along the lines of, who knows, right? Who knows that you were called for such a time as this? And if you remain silent, if you remain completely silent at this time, then relief and deliverance will come from some other place. And I think he said something like, you and your father's household should perish. Esther chapter 4, I believe it is. And so the same goes here. Sadly, there's a lot of boardroom people. There's a lot of people with authority and power. There's a lot of households. There's a lot of churches. There's a lot of elders. Their voice, because they chose not to stand up, because they chose to be silent, they will perish in the sense of your story, your good works will not be recorded because it was not done. It was not done at this time. And many people, you had the opportunity, but you chickened out. But there's other people, and this is why the book of Esther is even in existence. If she did not step up to this, somebody else would have, and their story would have been told. Esther would have gone to her grave. Millions of people would not have heard this story. And so you got to realize that you have a choice. And sadly, many are not choosing to step up to their calling, and their voice, their story is not going to be recorded. They're not going to get the credit. And so you have to realize that the movement here is about you and me, our grassroots effort in this time in choosing what you want to do, whether you have a say in the corporate boardroom, whether you have a say as a supplier, as a wholesaler, as a store owner, as a convenience store, as a consumer, as a drinker, whatever it is, right? And I'm not just talking about just beers here. I'm talking about every other area: education, politics, legal, Hollywood, entertainment, social, any one of these areas, right, is applicable in terms of the movement and gaining territory. This is your chance to step up. This is your moment that God has given you. And you have to realize the agenda. You have to recognize what's in the air and how Satan, he wants to advertise. He wants to market his domain. He wants to market his movement. If you allow him to do that, it's going to spread and permeate through the society. And so this is what's happening now, where they attempted to do this and it's backfiring. And at worst, it's going to bring Bud Light down. It's going to bring some of these guys down. It's going to push back this movement of LGBTQ and throwing it in our faces to tell us that if you drink this beer, you are also supporting this movement, right? And so that's why you have to push back. And so this is one good example of the power of your voice, of illustrating double standards, as well as the movement of territorial gain we need to have in the spirit, and how you and I, we are all stewards. We have to be good stewards of pushing, defending, and I'm not saying that you should be, pointing your finger and you're getting all aggressive, right? To each your own. Do what you believe is what God called you to do. If you have a voice, if you have to shout, then shout. But I'm not saying you have to lack love and grace and mercy in how you approach whatever it is that you've got to do. But this is a good example. I've called it out because it's just in the news right now, but also it's a good example of other movements, other things to come, and what you've got to do as a Christian in this time. And for other people, you got to wake up. You got to wake up to the agenda. If you're sitting there, you're drinking on your rainbow colored beer, you think, oh, like, this is fine. It's just the same beer, same whatever. And you have it stocked everywhere across your house. You are losing territory. So just want to give you guys this quick encouraging word Love you guys. Talk to you guys very soon.